One of the things that occurred to me here is as I was doing all the research, I'm sure this was true for you, and learning more about the story, I really came to appreciate that cockroach comment because like you can't kill those guys. Being an entrepreneur entails a lot of suffering. It's easy to look at the other end and see the success at the other end and think, "Gosh, I'd love to have that, I'd love to be that stuff." But man, there is a lot to this story where I'm not sure I would have survived. I'm not sure I wouldn't have quit so many times along the way because there's so much headwind that comes against this company at every step of the way. I mean, starting right up front with almost running out of cash, running on fumes, and continuing throughout. And I want to kind of lead into the next headwind that they faced, which was kind of shocking. So, by the summer of 2011, Airbnb was the darling of Silicon Valley. So they had borne out. They were the darling. Everybody thought this is the next big thing, and
They've hit some of the curve of growth.
yes,
With some validation.
and people were looking up to them and thinking, "Man, I wish I'd invested in that company." And everything seems to be going well, and they'd survived these near-death experiences, and they kind of found their growth engine, and they were expanding at a breakneck pace, which is another challenge. Many of these companies, it's sometimes when you start to expand, there's a lot of you got to hire people, you got all these issues. Uh, but the kind of the wrong on paper idea that surfaced at that point was that sleeping in a stranger's home was becoming normalized, and the company's valuation was soaring, but they were still strangers sleeping in your home. And that came back to haunt them. This whole concern that a lot of people had up front came back to haunt them in the summer of 2011. In San Francisco, there was a host named EJ who was a huge raving fan of Airbnb. She'd embraced the platform. She was running out her well-appointed apartment while she was away. It was like a perfect embodiment of the Airbnb promise, a trusted community where people could share their space to earn extra money and connect with travelers. But in June of 2011, she accepted a booking from a guest for a week-long stay, and everything seemed normal. But a few days into the stay, EJ received this disturbing email from her guest, and the tone was strange, and the excuses for not being able to pay an extension fee were convoluted. A sense of dread kind of began to creep in, and she finally returned to her apartment after the guest had left, and that dread turned into a living nightmare. Her home hadn't just been robbed, it had been meticulously and maliciously violated. The intruders had used a blowtorch to melt her grandmother's jewelry. They'd stolen her passport, cash, credit cards, camera, laptop. They had ransacked her closets, taking clothes and priceless heirlooms. Her personal documents were gone. What was left was a scene of chilling, calculated destruction. Can you imagine? You're signing up for this thing that's, all about the good in people, and, allowing strangers into your home. You get violated this way. I mean,
And violated is the right word.
yeah,
You feel violated in that
she
moment.
was, yeah, she was definitely feeling violated. So she did what any host would do. She contacted Airbnb. And sadly, the response she received was not one of empathy, but of cold corporate distance. This is, kind of the opposite of the wrong on paper. The right on paper was, I'm sure the attorneys took over and everybody said, we got to protect ourselves from this. And so she met this cold corporate distance. The customer service representative was polite, but unhelpful, quoting terms of service and directing her to the police. I can picture this.
Yeah, I mean,
Here's the terms of service. This is what you signed up for. No, it's like,
well, this is a legal
this is the
playbook.
police.
This
Yeah,
is
this is police.
Yeah.
It's like,
not our problem.
it's not our problem. This is a police problem, not ours. So the company, in its effort to protect itself legally, offered no immediate help, no financial assistance, and no real sense of responsibility. Heartbroken and furious, EJ did what any user would do. She turned to social media. She went public. She detailed her entire horrifying experience in a blog post titled "Violated," where we just use a travel ordeal. Well, as you might imagine, the post went viral, and it was viral for all the wrong reasons if you're Airbnb. So in their attempt to save themselves, they'd actually created this viral moment, and it was picked up by TechCrunch, which in Silicon Valley, everybody knows what that is. It's one of the most influential blogs in the tech world, under this headline: Airbnb user's home ransacked. Nightmare story is a PR disaster for the hot startup. You know, the news media.
What is it? Like, all press is good press. I think that this would fly in the face of that.
Well, you know, the news media loves a story, you know, the bright and shining startup that's, you know, the heralded new thing, and now they've got this horror story. The story was a cannonball through the hull of Airbnb's carefully crafted image of safe, trusted community. The comment sections and Twitter feeds exploded with outrage. The very foundation of their business, trust, was crumbling. So, you know, they did some of the standard things that would be right on paper. You know, they didn't accept liability. They issued a carefully worded statement out of the PR
Of
department.
course they did.
They let the police and insurance companies handle it. You know, this is an insurance problem. Police handle it, and handle the user privately to avoid public precedent. But, you know, along the way, I think Airbnb started going back to its roots, and something didn't feel right about that. So this negative situation actually got turned around by doing something that looked very wrong on paper. For CEO Brian Chesky, the crisis was becoming personal. You know, I think this is one of those situations where you start to take it personally,
Yes.
and it's a good thing that you feel that way. He watched horrified as the company he built was now being defined by this one incident. And he later admitted he was receiving advice from all sides, much of it conflicting. So I'm sure he was getting all this.
Holes in every direction.
Yes. But he realized the core problem. Trying to follow the standard corporate playbook, he was violating his own company's core values. So you got to give him a lot of credit for that. And I think all of us
self-awareness.
find ourselves sometimes struggling. It's like, well, I know this seems like the right thing to do, but inside it doesn't feel right. And I think when it doesn't feel right, that may be telling us something. It's like the anecdote versus the data.
Yes.
When those are conflicting, go with the anecdote that you were talking about earlier.
I've heard a quote. It's life is an exercise in increasing self-awareness. I think here, like, business is an exercise in increasing self-awareness. And you know, you want to be right every time, but if we're going to be honest, we're flawed. Like, we're going to make mistakes, but the willingness to increase in self-awareness here allows us to move forward in the story.
Well, to your very point, he said he was thinking to himself, he built this business based on human connection, but was responding like a faceless corporation. You know, that was this aha moment for him. It's this whole business, the undergirding of it, the foundation of it is all about human connection, but now they're responding to this incident like a faceless corporation. So he had a moment of clarity, which is what I love. You know, many times these things turn out that way. This wasn't a legal problem. It was a moral one. That's the point that he came to. This is not a legal issue. This is a moral issue for him. And the only way forward was to not mitigate liability, but take radical responsibility, is the way he thought about it. He decided to rip up the playbook and do something that would make his lawyers and investors terrified.
Can't wait for this.
He would apologize, and he would do it with money. I think of it as the $1 million apology. In early August, nearly 2 months after the incident, Brian published a public letter on the company's blog titled, "Our Commitment to Trust and Safety." It was a stunning reversal. Last month, the home of a San Francisco host named EJ was tragically vandalized by a guest, he began. The damage was so bad, she had to move out. When we learned of this, we were shocked and heartbroken. In the last few weeks, we've been in a mad scramble to make things right with EJ, but we've taken too long, and we have not been good enough. I love the humility in that, and I think
Ownership.
one of the things we see over and over is ownership and humility. He continued with a blunt admission of failure. He said, "We've learned a lot from this incident. We have felt paralyzed. We've made mistakes. We should have responded faster, communicated more sensitively, taken more responsibility. We let her down, and for that, we're very sorry." But words only go so far. I think he intuitively knew that in a situation where you've broken trust like this, words are not enough. Actions need to speak louder. So then came the wrong on paper, at least for lawyers and investors, bombshell. He announced that effective immediately, every booking would be covered by a $50,000 host guarantee. against property damage. So this is just something he probably couldn't afford to do, didn't know all the implications, but just felt like it was the right
That
thing
was
to do.
right. Yes.
He said this financially audacious, almost reckless. It exposed the young company. This is still a young company, growing company, to massive, unquantifiable risk of fraud and loss. It was a promise that could have bankrupted the company. But it was also a definitive statement that Chesky wasn't just saying sorry. He was putting the full financial weight of his company behind that apology. Now, here's the payoff. Many times we make that risky move, we make that wrong, and we do something unexpected, and something unexpected happens, as a result. And here's what happened. It said the public response shifted overnight. The anger at Airbnb's mishandling of the crisis was replaced by admiration for their radical act of accountability. The host guarantee was later increased to $1 million, and that's where it is today. $1 million became a cornerstone of their platform. It transformed their biggest PR disaster into their most powerful marketing tool, a tangible symbol of their commitment to trust. The incident forged the company's character. It taught them the principle that would guide them through future crises: take radical responsibility. When trust is broken, don't fix it with words. You fix it with decisive, meaningful, and often costly action. You have to be willing to own the mess to earn back the faith of your community. So the principle that came out of that for me, the thing I take away is, when trust is broken, trust isn't rebuilt with talk, it's paid for in action. Broken trust needs deeds, not dialogue. Talk won't fix what action broke. That's kind of the summary statement for me.
I also I think that there's this element of human connection. It wasn't until Brian Chesky, a human being, took accountability. As far as Airbnb took accountability, I think there would always be public sentiment against Airbnb in the situation. But as soon as there was a human who took accountability, I think that there's more compassion and forgiveness available for a person over a company. But there's also a lot more personal risk by taking personal accountability. It's a whole lot harder. And a lot more sacrifice. I almost think of it, it's like when you think about the sports world and, athletes who fail a test for performance enhancing drugs, you think about the way that some handle it, and it's deny, hide behind the shield, and then some come out and own it from the get-go. I made a mistake. They don't mince words. They own it and apologize for it. It's not 100% batting average, but the odds favor those who are willing to take on the pain in the short term, and be the person behind it and own it as a human being.
Another counterintuitive aspect of this that strikes me as a marketer with a marketing background is that many times your biggest crisis is often your best marketing opportunity. And it's very counterintuitive, but what we tend to do, if we act, if we do what's right on paper, it becomes your biggest marketing liability, which is where it was going. But by responding differently, it becomes your biggest marketing opportunity when you take responsibility for it and put action behind it. It's almost like judo, judo you use their strength to flip them. And I remember as a kid learning judo, and it's like use their size and weight against them. And the more you're fighting it, their size and weight kind of keeps coming after you. But when you start to acknowledge it, you can then flip it.
That's good.
That's what you do in judo.
And there's also this idea of, you called out a brand as the degree of emotional connection.
Yes.
And when everything goes right, people don't necessarily feel more emotionally connected. It's just like, this is how it's supposed to go. There's almost this counterintuitive opportunity when things go wrong.
Yeah.
To come back and exceed expectations in a way that creates additional emotional connection, thus growing the brand. And so, to your point, like the marketing opportunity in crisis is often more profound than people think.
Yes, very much so.